We got a highly diversified group of riders today. We got BMWs, we got Yamahas, we got Harley Davidsons, we got Indians. You name it, we got it here today. There's a BMW RT1200. It's very similar to the police model. Those bikes have like a 42-degree lean angle. There's a BMW Adventure Tour. I think that's a 1200. The big one, I'm not positive. Swinging and swaying. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. At first it's going to feel awkward. But the more you do it, the easier it's going to get, and it's going to start feeling good pretty soon. Couldn't be any easier. This is kid stuff. This is we start with the easy stuff, but you got to get that bike swinging and swaying. She's in the friction zone. She's got about 1,500 RPMs. Little pressure on the rear brake, and she's looking way ahead, swinging and swaying.
After the demonstration, the riders attempt the exercise. It's not always pretty at first, but they get better and better as they go along. Here's a very common mistake in this first exercise, that is trying to steer the motorcycle through the exercise without leaning it. We want to get that bike dipping so the rider feels that sensation where it dips back and forth, left and right, right to left. Eventually they all get it. And we have riders of varying abilities. This rider started off very good, no fear of the motorcycle, practiced before he got there, and does very well. You might recognize this rider. This is Linda. I've done a couple of videos with her. She had an extremely high fear factor, and the fear is still there, but she's improved immensely, as you can see here.
Notice she's never at idle. She's always above idle. The bike is either turning in one direction or another. I want you to feel that transition as it turns from one direction to another.
Of course, once the demonstration is through, the riders attempt it. And I believe this shot you're seeing here is their very first time through this exercise. And the mistakes are, well, they're always the same with riders who haven't tried a particular exercise before. They're going a bit too slow. Their head turns are a bit too slow. Speed through here, ideal speed should be 10 to 12 miles an hour. Now this rider on the Sport Glide, he doesn't have a high fear factor, but he's not used to doing this, so of course he's a little tentative. And the trick to this exercise is to getting that head turn really quick. The faster and further you turn your head, the better. If you don't turn your head, there you go. He misses the gate because he didn't turn his head quick enough. This rider on the Sportster has practiced prior to getting here, and he's doing very well. Plus, this is an older Sportster, and the older Sportsters, if it wasn't the low model, they had very good ground clearance. The newer ones, not so much, but this bike, you could really lean it over before anything starts to scrape the ground. And the rider has a very low fear factor. Here's the rider I featured in yesterday's video on the $37,000 Indian. He doesn't have a high fear factor, that's for sure. He practiced before he got here. He's not afraid of his motorcycle. And even though this is his very first time through, he does quite well. Yes, he could be leaning a little bit more, and he could pick up his speed a little bit more, and he does as we go along. This rider's main problem is going a bit too slow, and his head turns also are a bit too slow. I explained this to him after the class, though he did improve greatly by the end of the class, and you're going to see that. The entire class lasts about 4 to 5 hours, depending on how many riders we have. Once the riders have completed every single exercise, and you're only seeing about half of them here in this video, we give them the option if they'd like to try a skills competition. We have them run through the intersection, and we tell them to try to do it as quickly as possible with the least amount of errors. An error would be put a foot down, we'd add a second, hit a cone, we add a second, etc. And then we give a trophy to the rider who did the best in the competition. And a lot of times people seem to be, with a little pressure on them, they do better most of the time. Sometimes the very best rider in the class, the pressure gets to them and they try to ride a little bit above their limits. And you'll see that here. And I'm going to let you watch this, and you try to pick out which is the rider who's going to actually do the best time with the least amount of errors. On some of the bikes, the smaller bikes like the Sportster and the BMW 1250 that you see in this, because they're more nimble bike, it's not quite fair. So what we do is we give them a handicap of 1 second. We add a second to their time. I try to make it as fair as possible. And keep in mind, too, that we have classes all over the country. We have, I believe it's 22 Ride Like a Pro schools around the country. And if you go on my website, ridelikeapro.com, and you click on training locations, you'll find the nearest class to you. I only teach the class here in the New Port Richey area, and we do that just about every Sunday. To find out about their schedules, the other classes around the country, just shoot them an email. You'll see their email, or give them a phone call. Both their email and their phone number is on their website. So give them a call, tell them you'd like to be in the class. And this is, keep in mind, an advanced class. If you want to get way ahead of the game, all you got to do is practice prior to getting there. And the best way to practice is get my Ride Like a Pro video. The first hour of that video is the exact class that we all teach all over the country. If you get there knowing the techniques and practice a few of the exercises, you'll be way ahead of the game. You should also notice in this how much these riders have improved in such a short amount of time. We take them from using their instincts to using technique, and it just gets better from here. If you continue to practice, you'll get better and better. You might be able to pick out the mistakes the riders are making here. If they go past the line of cones, in other words, outside the line, or the imaginary line, we also add a second. This rider improved greatly. She doesn't look fantastic here, but she did improve greatly from earlier this morning. No question about it, they've all improved. Even this rider, who is quite what I call a timid rider, he had been riding, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, he said. He just bought this motorcycle recently. So yeah, he needs more practice. In fact, he'd probably do well with a private lesson. And by the way, the riders don't have to do this. The class is already over. This is an option, and we give them the option of being in this competition or not. But most of the time, most of the riders want to at least give it a try. Average time through the intersection, if I averaged all the classes, it would be somewhere around 32 to 34 seconds. And this rider, even though he's making mistakes, was within that average. Watch this rider carefully. He's very good. He's got a real good handle on the techniques. So until next time, keep the shiny side up.